All right, let's jump into the first topic, Jacob. We're going to talk about the players, the prospects that are on the Packers' radar at the moment, okay? So what does this mean? I kind of talked about it already. Easton Butler, he's reporting these players have already met with the Packers. We do this every year. You can see here on our board, we've got it sorted by overall grade. And again, you guys have access to this over at patreon.com /Packer Fan Total Access. So when you look at the board, Fernando Mendoza's at the top of the board. His grade's a 2.3. Low number of wins here, guys, okay? You guys know what's baked into the equation here, what's baked into our board, essentially. So as we go down the list, like you got Mendoza 1, Jeremiah Love 2, you got David Bailey 3, Caleb Downs 4, Ruben Bain 5. That's your top 5 on our board. Their grades are 2.3, 2.7, 4.1. Those guys are in the same tier. And then from 7.6 to 9.6, 9.7, that'll be a separate tier for Caleb Downs, Ruben Bain, and Mansour Delaney, cornerback out of LSU. Now, as we go down the board, where's the first prospect we get to that the Packers have met with? It's Jennings Dunker, offensive tackle out of Iowa. He is sitting in the 22 spot for us. Now, that's important. When you look at the consensus big board, he's in the 34 spot. The PFF big board had him at 44. We've got him worthy of the 25th pick at 25.8, although he's sitting 22 on our board. The lower you get down the board, obviously, those numbers kind of flip a little bit, and you can make a case for a lot of guys at the back side of the draft that are worthy of said pick. But again, when you look at the grade, it's just a very general way of looking at it, going, okay, if you get down into the 200s and you got a guy at 160 as a grade, he'd probably be justified as the 160th pick to a certain degree, okay? So just a good little broad way of measuring that. Jennings Dunker, offensive tackle out of Iowa, is the first player the Packers have met with highest on our board at 25.8. Now, you got to go down a little ways to find the next one, and that player is going to be Brian Parker II. We've talked about both of these players. We drafted them in our mock drafts, right? You're already seeing the crosshairs kind of zeroing in on a couple of different prospects here early, right? He's in the 66 spot for us. However, we've got a grade of 57.8 on him. That's right there in that range of 52, in my opinion. He's a guy that, according to the information we've got right now, and again, that'll change as we get closer to the draft, he was in the 80 spot for the consensus big board. The PFF big board at the end of the college football season had him at 102. We landed him much higher than that at 66. He'll probably continue to rise up boards. We've got a profile built of him over in our Patreon group. You can go look at that scouting report if you'd like to. But now you've got Brian Parker II. He's listed as a center. That's what he's being projected at mostly. He played tackle at Duke, but they're projecting him as a guard and a center, and it sounds like he may be one of the top centers in this draft. He actually leapfrogged a lot of other true centers, but people feel comfortable that Brian Parker Jr. could be, or Brian Parker II could be a center in the NFL. Moving on down the list. Next, you've got Darrell Jackson Jr. from Florida State, defensive tackle. He's got an 86.0 grade on him. All right. And he's sitting in the 101 spot. So again, wherever you're picking at, you got to try to line these guys up with where you're picking. If Darrell Jackson is there when you pick in the 4th round, run the card. 3rd round, bit of a reach, right? And that's what we always talk about when it comes to the defensive tackle position in this specific draft, right? This is how it always happens, is because you got guys, yeah, you would love to have those picks. You would love to have those guys, right? However, not at the detriment of, okay, we're going to pass up on the 50th best prospect at 84 and go get the guy that's at 101. So that's how the board is kind of shaking out at the moment. Next on the list is Will, and I'm going to butcher the name here, Will Kaczmarek maybe, tight end out of Ohio State. He's a guy, I think he transferred to Ohio State if I remember correctly. You guys do your own research there. We got a 96.0 grade on him. The consensus big board had him at 193. His PFF grades have really helped him, and I need to go ahead and add a PFF big board grade or ranking in for him as well. He's in the 109 spot currently, is the tight end out of Ohio State. The Packers have met with him. Next, you've got Nadami Tucker, edge out of Western Michigan. He's got a grade of 103.0 for our board, and he's currently sitting in the 118 spot. So you're seeing multiple positions. We've seen offensive line. We've seen defensive tackle. We've seen edge. We're seeing tight ends pop up now as you got John Michael Gillenborg out of Wyoming sitting in the 129 spot. He's got a grade of 112.7. You can find his scouting report in our Patreon group as well. Caleb Proctor, defensive tackle out of Southeastern Louisiana, in the 143 spot. We've got a 122.5 grade on him. One of those guys I really like in this draft. The problem is he played for a small school. Is that going to matter? They said the same stuff about Tucker Kraft. It didn't matter. They said the same stuff about Christian Watson. It didn't matter. They said the same stuff about Josh Allen, right? Playing, where did he go? Wyoming or wherever?
Wyoming. Yep.
He's now a MVP caliber quarterback. So again, that stuff's going to come into play big time. Next, you've got your first halfback on the board, Damone Claiborne, and he's a halfback out of Wake Forest. He's got a grade of 132.7. He's in the 156 spot. And this is an interesting one. We've got him at 132.5. The PFF Big Board had him at 124. The Consensus Big Board had him at 138. However, Walter Football had him listed as the 70th best prospect. So they are much higher on him than we are. And we got to make a decision on Walter Football here real soon. We just put that in as a placeholder because 33rd team are not giving their data out anymore. So there's your first running back on the board. So you're kind of seeing where the team may be lining up specific positions. There's a cornerback, Malik Muhammad, at 216. All right, that's much later in the draft, obviously. And these are going to get filled in. Jacob, I want to get your take on all this. I'm pretty sure that last year, I want to say if we were to pull up the 2025 board, there was like 170 prospects the Packers met with that we had knowledge of. They probably met with more that went under the radar. So this is obviously just a very small sample size, but is there any positions that jump out to you? It sounds like early what the Packers are looking at least up to this point on February the 8th, is offensive line with the 52nd pick, and then with the 84th pick, maybe a defensive tackle, and then tight end after that maybe, because you got a couple tight ends that come in right around the time that we took Kazoyo, to be honest with you. I'm waiting for them to meet with him. But what do you think about this so far?
Yeah, I know you love him. Like I said or like Doug says here, he says Dunker is still too low on the PTA board with no mullet and waterfall bonus on Culver's bonus applied. I mean, we should definitely somehow Emilio has to put that one into the chat and figure out how that works. But all things considered, like I honestly do think that it sounds boring, and in years past I probably would have never focused so much on the offensive line. I just do think that that's our biggest point of need at the moment. I do like what you talked about though with Malik Muhammad. He's a guy that I really do like, but it does just feel like that our most glaring need right now, especially depending on what happens with Banks and with Jenkins, is going to have to be offensive line. So that's where I'm focusing right now. It's not a sexy pick. It's not cool, as the kids say, but it's just kind of what I'm at now.
Yeah, it ain't cool until you get your ass kicked in the trenches and playoff.
Right. Yeah.
That's when it's cool.
And we've talked about this now for years, right? Getting our butts kicked when the freaking Philadelphia Eagles did it to us, and now all of a sudden it seems like the whole year last year we did it.
Yeah, and what's funny too is as you get on down the stretch here, another thing that's going to just get pushed to the side is kicker. Nobody's going to talk about kicker until next year.
You're about to blow
when
the
you miss
chat
the kicks, right? So you got to be aware of that throughout this process as well. I'm not saying you should draft a kicker, and I know there's somebody had a hateful comment in the YouTube comments the other day and said we've already got our kicker. It's Havrasik, and I'm like, I know people love Havrasik. Are we forgetting how many kicks he missed too? Didn't he miss 2 or 3 in one game as well? So it's there's a reason he's available, guys. There's a reason that he was available. I know he kicked the franchise record, longest kick, and that's all well and good. Would you rather have a guy who only hits 75% of his kicks and hits one of those boom ones every now and again, or would you rather get somebody who's going to hit every kick inside 45 yards? For me, it's the latter, obviously. So in terms of Dunker, I know Packer Doug was being somewhat joking there, but the fact that he's in 22 spot on our board, keep in mind the Consensus Big Board had him at 34. And the PFF Big Board had him at 44, so we were actually higher on him. He'll probably climb up into the first round now. Everybody's catching up on that and really, really jumping into the buzz there with Jennings Donker. So now, again, if we go – this is what I was trying to tell you guys too. If you go to the top right here, this first column, and just sort, you guys have access to this over on Patreon. Bang. Now you get all the cheese up to the top. Now, unfortunately, it does not sort by final grade no matter how you do this, so we'll have to kind of do a little bit of extra research. But – again, let's just go through the positions. We're not going to name off everybody, but here are the positions the Packers have met with so far. Offensive tackle, center, tight end, defensive tackle, halfback, quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, tight end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver, edge, offensive tackle, tight end, wide receiver, offensive tackle, wide receiver, tight end. There's a few wide receivers in there, boys. And there's also, again, tight end doesn't surprise me. But One of the other things that does kind of, pique my interest a little bit is like what we talked about at quarterback, the fact that they've met with one, I think they met with two. I want to say we had two. We're only showing one here. I may have missed one earlier, so I'll have to go add that in. But they're keeping their eye on some undrafted quarterbacks, I would imagine. So that's going to be interesting, too, to see who ends up making the cut there. But if you were to look at just this list here and just, all right, what I like to do is when I sort by the cheese emoji, look over to the right, the final grade, who's under 100 score? Brian Parker II. Right? Darrell Jackson, defensive tackle out of Florida State. Is there anybody else? On down the list here, you've got Will Kakmarek, or however you say the name. He's a 96. And then, of course, you've got here's a safety. Actually, no, he didn't meet with the Packers, so that one does not apply. So you can kind of see some of these players that have a good grade. Jennings Dunker, of course, at 25.8, we already talked about. So it's just it's important to kind of keep tabs on this, and I love the fact that it's on the board. So you can pull that information immediately and go, okay, who have they met with? And again, when you talk about the spades and everything, the way that we differentiate these players in terms of, all right, these are the guys who prime for the pick and for the Packers. You've got the spade that's like the absolute perfect pick, and then you've got the gold bar, which is like, okay, in the past, this is the pool that the Packers have pulled from. So by the time the draft gets here, and it's time to do our draft coverage, what you'll be able to do is just search by the gold bar, and then the gold bar will literally pull up, all right, here's pretty much the Packers' favorite list is what it essentially tells you. Now, doesn't mean they won't draft somebody outside of that because sometimes the board falls that way. But again, it's really interesting to see how all that kind of falls into place as you get closer to the draft. So anything else you want to hit here in terms of prospects on the radar, Jacob? Anything at all?
I guess what I would ask you is, what would be your most surprising position that they would draft that nobody's thinking? Would it be, obviously it's not going to be kicker, we're not the Bears, but it could be maybe, let's say, a quarterback or a cornerback, or would it be a wide receiver? Would it be a tight end? Because we've touched on some of these, how it doesn't necessarily feel like a need, but once we get into that position where, who knows how these guys fall on their draft board, where they're like, we can't not pick this guy. Would there be one that would absolutely shock you?
Yeah,
because they're going to do it to us. They're going to do it to us, dude.
Oh, yeah. When you say, shock you, nothing would shock me because it all comes down to the board. And again, we're just showing everybody our board. We don't know how Goody's board looked like. Obviously, last year, we had Anthony Belton significantly lower than where the Packers took him. Now, I'm not trying to sound arrogant or egotistical or anything. Again, these aren't my personal opinions on our board. This is just the formula we've created. No. That holds true that we kind of had that right up to this point. We were saying he was probably worthy of a third-round pick. If he's a third-round pick and he played as much as he did last year, people probably love that pick. But the fact that he was a second-round pick and he graded out in the 40s according to PFF, we've seen him struggle at tackle position, kind of lends credence to, okay, it looks like our board was a little more accurate there than maybe Goody's was where they took him. Now, with that being said, other people look at the draft differently. We're looking at, physical traits. We're looking at size. We're looking at athleticism. We're looking at all these things, football IQ. What did he score on the Wonderlic? All that stuff, right? This is just kind of more of a data-driven project. But to answer your question, Jacob, if I had to pick one position and go, wow, that's surprising. If at 52 they take a wide receiver, I would be I wouldn't go, oh, my God, I can't believe they did it. I'd go, of course they did. But that would be the one for me, would be wide receiver, because when you look at the wide receiver room, there's a reason we're letting Romeo Doubs walk, is to get Matthew Golden more snaps. And if you turn around and you spin the 52nd pick on a wide receiver, you kind of feel like you're spinning your wheels there a little bit. Unless, of course, just like in the second round before, that second round pick ends up being Jordy Nelson or Devontae Adams or whoever, Christian Watson, right? And that's what you've got to be real with yourself and run it through that filter and go, okay, you think it would be such a surprise to take a wide receiver in the second round? So if you're telling me you had a 99% thought that, hey, look, I am 99% confident that this wide receiver sitting on the board when we pick at 52 is the next coming of Jordy Nelson, you wouldn't make that pick? I would make that pick if I knew that, right? Me too. But again, obviously this stuff's all a crapshoot, even for the top GMs in the league. So,
one last question: what do you think about the tight end from Notre Dame, Eli Raridon?
Yeah, Eli Raridon. So he's an interesting one. You guys know I'm a Notre Dame fan. It's tough because when you talk about players that are a part of your favorite program, like I expected Eli Raridon to be a huge focal point for the Irish last year. I expected him to be kind of like, all right, Eli Raridon's about to have a breakout year. He's going to be kind of in the past, the NFL has drafted Notre Dame tight ends fairly high, right? You've seen your Michael Mayers. You've seen, I can't remember the guy that was in Minnesota for a while. Man, Tyler Eifert, maybe.
Yep.
So, and I don't even know if he went in the first round, but you've seen Notre Dame tight ends. We typically ran like a pro style offense at Notre Dame. So those guys, they come in with prototypical tight. Like they just landed, I think they landed the top tight end or maybe one of the top 3 freshman tight ends in high school, like coming out of high school in Ian Primer. And he's another specimen. These guys, they come in and they're like anywhere from 6'4" to 6'6", 240 pounds. And they're just like, all right, that's what you're looking for in a prototypical, tight end. There you go. Thank you, Zamil. Zamil said, Kyle Rudolph. Yeah, another one, right? So Eli Raritan, in my opinion, again, go to the board. Forget how I felt, whether he was used right or not used correctly at Notre Dame, whether he performed or underperformed. You got to look at him as a pro prospect now. The board has him with a 94.8 grade. Walter Football said he's worthy of 74. However, Consensus Big Board had him at 135. PFF Big Board had him at 123. The thing that's helping in his 25 PFF grade, he was the 89th ranked tight end, which is actually a fairly decent grade. Anytime you can get in the top 100 at your respective position across all of college football, over 400 teams, it usually is saying something. So, we've got a 94.8 on him, Jacob. We got him in the 108 spot. That would suggest if you're going to take him, you have to take him at 84. I would not want to do that. Right. If we're going to take a tight end around that mark, let's see if we can get Tanner Kazoil out of Houston. Now, there's 2 different builds, right? Raritan is more your traditional Y tight end that's going to block in line, that type of thing. Tanner Kazoil is a guy that's a physical freak, 6'7", more of a receiving tight end, right? So, again, it's how do you want to utilize that player? And this is something Greg Cosell talks about all the time on his draft coverage is deployment. What are we talking about in terms of deployment? Do you want him to play traditional wide? Do you want him to play flex? Do you want him to roam? Do you want him to be an H-back? What do you need him to do in your offense? And when it comes to Tanner Kazoil, it's like, okay, I could see him like a Luke Musgrave, but don't we need help run blocking? So wouldn't you like to lean into maybe someone who could run block a little bit better? And that may be Eli Raritan. So, again, we've got a scouting report on Kazoil. You guys can check it out in the Patreon group. We don't have one on Eli Raritan. If you'll notice, what I've tried to do is go through and begin creating scouting reports for the guys who have really good grades compared to where the Consensus Big Board has them ranked. And then also I'm trying to get the cheese emojis done. That way the guys that are on the Packers radar, you guys get familiar with them early throughout the draft process, if that makes sense. So, but that's going to do it for this segment, guys. If you guys are watching this back later, let us know in the comments, how do you feel about the way the board is shaking out right now? Also, let me know about the players the Packers have met with up to this point. How do you guys feel about some of those players and specifically the positions? Because right now we don't know much about these players, right? It's more about, are the Packers really keying in on certain positions? It seems like offensive line is at the top of the priority list. And right now, surprisingly, cornerback doesn't look like it is so much. Maybe that'll change as we get closer to the draft. And also keep in mind, there's smoke screens going up. It's lion season. We've officially entered lion season. So anyway, let us know in the comments. How do you feel about this? Make sure you hit like, subscribe, click the bell icon so you're notified when we go live here in the future. All right.